has been a game changer for India's digital adoption of financial streams, right? And one of the biggest reasons this was possible was because it was free for both the customer and the merchant. So, in the other side of the story, let's say for you to accept a card, you have to pay somewhere between 0.75% to 2% of transaction fees on the total volume of the transaction. And that is why you don't see a lot of merchants accepting cards and other forms of digital currencies to accept in the first place, right? Whereas UPI changed this. UPI was 100% free for both ends. But as you know, there are no free lunches. So who is really paying for these UPI payments? So in this episode of Indian Opinion, we're gonna dive deep into India's free payment system and who is really paying for it. So let's get started with who is paying and what is the cost, right? So the total cost for running the UPI network the last year was about 4,000 crores or $501 million, right? And where did this money come from? So largely this money is being shared by three people. One is your payment apps like phonepe, Google Pay, and their payment processors, and then the NPCI. So somewhere like in the ranges of 0.75% is what is the total cost of the transaction value that the people that are transacting on the UPI network have to end up paying, have to be paid for, right? So who is this payment processor? The payment processors are generally banks, right? So let's say on Google Pay, if you've linked your bank account with SBI, SBI is your payment processor. So SBI is taking a charge on that in and of itself. And then there's an interchange charge that the SBI has to pay to the bank that's receiving and all of those things. So that's where the 0.75% of the total charge comes. And so, which means that UPI is not free. UPI has a certain level of cost to it, and then somebody is paying for that, right? So why is it free then? Like, why is nobody trying to collect that 0.75%? It is because the financial ministry went ahead and called UPI a public good and wanted it to be free for everyone, right? And also by virtue of that, not collect money on top of it by any means. And that has certainly helped. Like, we have passed like 2/3 of Indian digital transactions being done through UPI exclusively, and that has also increased the pie in and of itself. The number of digital transactors have also increased over time. And that is a very, very big thing at the end of the day. However, what is these payment companies going to do for that, right? Let's go ahead and look back before UPI. Back when, let's say, Paytm's QRs were in the rage, like Paytm was able to charge its merchants a certain fee to collect on their QR in and of itself. But that's not possible anymore. So, like, fundamentally, UPI is free because the government is pushing it to be free. But that doesn't stop these payment companies from going ahead and collecting money on it. So, if you look at Paytm, PhonePe and all of these players recently, you would be seeing that they're going ahead and collecting a platform fee for, let's say, mobile prepaid recharge or DTH recharge, etc. This requires a certain level of infrastructure to be set up for them to be able to process these recharges, and by virtue of that, they're able to go ahead and collect a platform fee. And that platform fee is generally very low at this moment, but like they are still collecting that fee and trying to go ahead and cover for those costs at the end of the day. So that's one thing that is happening. But what are the problems of UPI remaining free by virtue of these mandates, right? There are two problems, right? Let's say even now, the NPCI says that their success rate on payments is about 65% to 95%. There's a very big range, right? Let's say the SBI is able to get to like a 95-98%, whereas let's say rural banks or let's say non-major banks in India have it at 60-65% because they don't have any incentive to go and keep the system working where they're losing money when their customers transact, right? So that is becoming a huge problem for this network, and reliability of the network goes down in and of itself. The second problem is that UPI fraud is a very, very big part of the entire system even today. And because of that very same reason, it needs to be tackled with, right? And people need to take measures to ensure that fraud does not happen on the network. Whereas, because there is no incentive for these companies to go ahead and make any changes to their system or invest into security infrastructure, even though UPI is massively growing, it is not able to go ahead and become better with that growth, right? Because nobody is investing back money into it because it's a money-losing engine. So because of that, the government will now have to step in and do something about it. So right now, let's say companies are trying to charge a platform fee and get away with it, but that's not going to go a long way in terms of how to cover for this, right? So eventually there needs to be a middle ground. If it doesn't remain free for merchants, it does not fundamentally become viable for anyone to operate, and the traction will reduce, right? P2P will of course remain free because most of the other options are also free today. So what is it going to be? I think one of the solutions like that are floated is that the massive number of UPI transactions happen on platforms like Amazon, Flipkart, or let's say Reliance Jio platforms, etc. So just charge these big players, let the small shopkeepers remain free, whereas the big ones end up paying for this, right? So that you go ahead and cover for some virtue of cost. The second thing is that there's a UPI 2.0 being proposed, whereas there can be multiple levels of UPIs, right, that are managed by multiple entities, not just the NPCI, and they can go ahead and look for other business models. However, the conclusion to this discussion is that UPI is not free, someone is paying for it, and the cost will eventually come to us. Thank you.